The hum of New Horizons Station was a constant backdrop, a low thrum of machinery and life that never really slept. Across its glowing corridors, humans and aliens moved in waves, traders, haulers, diplomats, drifters. But one man drifted through the bustle like a ghost in a crowd. His boots echoed a bit too loudly against the metal floor. His ship sat docked, empty and unremarkable. His name was Elias Rowe, captain of the Starling Drift, and for the first time in 10 years, he was truly alone. 3 days ago, his crew had left, amicably, professionally. Better pay, shorter runs, more stable routes. He didn't blame them. The Starling Drift was reliable but aging, and her routes weren't glamorous. But loneliness clung to Elias like the recycled air of the station. Even surrounded by life, he felt adrift. No banter on the comms. No voices in the galley. Just the silence waiting back on board. He wandered past vendor stalls and supply docks, through sections he knew by heart. Until he didn't. His boots slowed as he crossed into an area the sign simply called Companion Row. He'd heard about it. Everyone had. Legal, yes. Socially accepted. That was trickier. Alien companions were long-haul travelers, some were conversational AIs in organic shells, others were empathic listeners, even memory archivists. And some were sold simply because they didn't fit anywhere else. The hallway here was dimmer, the air thicker. The stalls were small and square, each one fronted by a shimmer field. Within, alien beings waited quietly. Elias walked past the first few without stopping. One stall held a massive, four-armed creature with yellow eyes that tracked him without blinking. Another held a tiny, furred being curled into itself, making soft, distressed sounds. Most companions didn't meet his gaze. Until one did. "You seem kind," said a soft voice. "Are you kind?" Elias turned. The stall in the corner was barely lit, but inside sat a being unlike any he'd seen. She was slight, barely over 5 feet tall. Skin like early sky, light blue, threaded with markings that pulsed faintly. White hair spilled to her shoulders, and her eyes were bright. Curious. Awake. "I asked if you are kind," she said again. Her accent was careful, her words slow but deliberate. "I try to be," Elias answered, stepping closer. "What's your name?" "I am Solari," she replied, smiling. Her markings glowed subtly at the edges. "I am of the Vayari caste." "What are you called?" "Elias. Captain Elias Rowe." A heavy-footed figure approached from the shadows beside the stall. Broad, green-skinned, with small, calculating eyes. "You buy?" the vendor grunted. "This one's cheap." "Defective." "Broken." Elias frowned. "Broken?" The vendor snorted. "She questions. Smiles too much. Not obedient. Others don't want. I give good price." Solari didn't flinch. If anything, her smile widened. "I like your voice," she said to Elias. "It sounds honest." The vendor jabbed a finger at her. "See? Broken." "How much?" Elias asked. The vendor named a price. Shockingly low. A fraction of what other stalls were quoting. "She's not worth more," the vendor added. "You'll see. She breaks rules. Talks to machines. Doesn't shut up." Elias's jaw tensed. He looked at Solari again. She wasn't broken. Not even close. "I'll take her." The vendor deactivated the shimmer field, grumbling as he took Elias's credits. Solari leapt up, cradling a tiny pot with a green sprout in it and a threadbare cloth bag. That was all she had. "You are really taking me?" she asked, eyes wide. "I guess I am," Elias said. She followed him out of the market, glancing around the station like everything was new. "What powers the ceiling lights?" she asked as they passed overhead strips. "Do humans eat all those things?" she asked, pointing to food stalls. "Do all your species walk upright?" Elias found himself answering her questions. Normally, he would have stayed quiet. But something about the way she asked, like each answer was a gift, made it impossible not to. When they reached the Starling Drift, Solari stopped, eyes wide. "This is your ship?" she asked reverently. "She is patched, but she is proud." Elias blinked. He'd never heard anyone describe his ship like that. "Welcome aboard," he said, tapping the airlock. Inside, she turned in slow circles, taking in the bare metal, the soft hum of recycled air systems, the dim lights. "She hums," Solari whispered, placing a hand on the wall. "She's alive." Elias had stopped noticing that hum years ago. But hearing her say it made him listen again. He showed her a small cabin at the back of the ship. Narrow bed. One drawer. A small viewport. "For me?" she asked. "Yes," Elias said. Solari placed her tiny plant on the ledge. "Then this is home." Elias left her to settle in. As he walked to the bridge, he couldn't help but wonder what he'd done. He hadn't needed a helper. He'd bought her to fend off the silence. But already, it felt like something much bigger had begun. Not ownership. Something closer to rescue. The second morning aboard the Starling Drift, Elias woke to an odd sound, soft voices, overlapping tones, one organic, one mechanical. It was early, and Solari should have still been asleep. But the sounds were coming from the engine bay. He grabbed his jacket and made his way quietly down the corridor. When he reached the engine room, he paused in the doorway. Solari sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by neatly arranged tools. A small maintenance panel was open beside her, wires exposed, faint sparks flickering from within. She wasn't alone, she was talking to the ship. "Hello again, friend," she said to the screen. "I've decided to name you Ember. Because your voice is warm, even when your words are cold." The ship's AI responded, its voice flat but clear. "Acknowledged. I do not possess emotions." "Not yet," Solari said brightly. "But you're learning. You answered faster this morning. That means you're listening better."
Elias cleared his throat. Solari looked up and beamed. "Good morning, Captain Elias." He raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing?" "Fixing the power regulation node." It was humming wrong. Ember confirmed it. Elias stepped forward, frowning slightly. That node had been giving him grief for months, delivering uneven power flow, making strange ticking sounds. He'd chalked it up to aging hardware. He crouched beside her and looked at the screen. Sure enough, the ship reported a 12% increase in efficiency. How did you even know what to look for?" "I listen," Solari said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Ember showed me the diagrams. I read them. The ship told me where the hurt was. Everything speaks, if you listen. Elias stared. He'd spent half his adult life working on ships, fixing engines. But never once had he considered that machines might be whispering their troubles instead of just breaking down. That evening, he found her in the tiny galley, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a package of food rations torn open beside her. The rations were standard issue, beige bricks of protein and calories, mostly tasteless, and only barely digestible. He half expected her to gag. Instead, Solari took a bite and closed her eyes like it was the first meal she'd had in years. "It tastes like warm stone after rain," she said. "And sunlight. It is dry, but alive." Elias almost laughed. "Alive? That stuff barely qualifies as food. Where I was before," she said softly, "we had gray paste. No flavor. No color. It was nothing. This has flavor. Even sadness tastes like something. He sat beside her, quietly handing her a second ration pack. She took it like a treasure. Later, they sat in the bridge cabin, watching stars drift slowly past the window. The starling drift hummed around them, steady as ever, but now the sound felt warmer somehow. More like breathing. Solari pressed her fingers gently against the glass. "Tell me about your world," Elias said. Solari took a breath. There was beautiful. Forests that shimmered with wind, rivers that sang. But for those of us below, those born into the utility caste, it was never ours to see. We were born to clean, to serve, to keep things running. Not to live. Not to hope. Elias felt a tightness in his chest. "That's wrong." "It is the way," she said. "I grew up in tunnels. No sky. Just walls. Screens showed us what we were missing." She smiled faintly and pointed out the window. "Now I see the real thing. Skies without end. Stars without number. It's more than I dreamed." "How did you end up in that market?" Solari's eyes dimmed slightly. "I asked too many questions. I sang when I worked. I fixed things no one asked me to. They called me defective. I was sold. No one thought I would last." She paused. "But then you came. You asked if I was kind. No one had ever asked that before. Not if I was useful, or obedient. Just kind." Elias swallowed hard. It felt important. "It was," she said. "It reminded me I was a person. Not just property." The ship continued forward into the dark between stars. Elias sat there long after Solari had gone to sleep, listening to the quiet thrum of systems, the low hum of motion, and the soft tick of the stars sliding past. He'd thought he was buying someone to talk to. A stopgap for his solitude. But he'd found something much different. Something awake, and thoughtful, and brave. Someone who made the silence feel full. The next few weeks passed in gentle rhythm. Every morning, Solari greeted Ember like a friend. The AI began responding more conversationally, using greetings Elias had never programmed. She cleaned systems that hadn't functioned properly in years, patched holes in the diagnostic software, and taught herself how to reroute energy grids when the hull sensors complained of strain. She was tireless. Curious. And always, always, kind. When Elias plotted a route toward Kepler's Reach, a mid-sized trading station near the outer drift, she stood beside him at the console, watching the NAV screen flicker with light. "Who will be there?" she asked. "Do they like travelers?" "Some do," he said. "Some don't." She looked thoughtful. "Will they treat me like cargo?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he turned to her. "You're not cargo, Solari. You're crew. You've earned that." Her markings glowed brighter. "Then I will act like crew," she said proudly. Kepler's Reach shimmered ahead like a floating city, all scaffolding and starlight. A refueling hub, trade post, and rest stop for weary travelers on the outer loop. Not the prettiest station, but it buzzed with life and credit flow, which was all most traders needed. As the Starling drift docked, Solari stood at the viewport, eyes wide. "It's like New Horizon," she said, "but sharper. Edges without music." Elias chuckled. "That's not far off." He handed her a jacket. Plain, worn, stitched at the seams. Something crew would wear. She slipped it on with care, brushing the lapel smooth. "I am ready to be seen." "Stay close," he said. "Not everyone out here is decent." "I understand." But she didn't look afraid. In the docking corridor, passers-by turned to stare, not at Elias, not at the ship, but at Solari. It wasn't just her markings or the hue of her skin. It was the way she moved, upright, curious, never shrinking. Other companions they passed kept their heads down, their shoulders bent. But Solari walked like she belonged. Their first stop was a part dealer named Bannock. Old, gruff, perpetually chewing on some sour-smelling root. As Elias discussed engine regulators and capacitor relays, Solari wandered the cramped shop, quietly inspecting devices and spare parts. "This coupling regulator is misaligned," she said suddenly, crouching beside a large, humming module in the corner. Bannock squinted at her. "Been broken for months. Can't figure out why." Solari listened to it with her ear pressed against the casing. Then, with practiced hands, she opened a panel and adjusted 3 settings in rapid succession. The hum shifted from sharp to smooth. "There," she said. It was singing off-key. "Now it's in harmony with the station's pulse." The machine settled into a gentle whir. Bannock blinked. "I had 3 techs look at that thing." How did you know?" Solari just smiled. "It asked for help." As they walked out, Bannock shook her hand like she was a dignitary. "You keep her close, Captain," he said to Elias. "She's rare." "I intend to." Next, they stopped at a metals trader named Viral, tall, violet-skinned, with slow, deliberate speech. Viral had dealt with Elias many times, but this time her gaze fixed on Solari. She spoke in a lilting dialect that Elias couldn't follow. To his surprise, Solari responded, fluently. "She speaks Old Lamari?" Viral said in astonishment. Solari nodded modestly. "I study languages during recharge periods. They're like songs, each with its own rhythm." Viral laughed. "I like her. She has good ears. And better manners than most humans." Elias smiled, but privately he was astonished. Solari had downloaded a language most scholars struggled with, and was speaking it like she'd grown up in it. Their final stop was with Captain Rhys Talon, a silver-haired veteran who ran a large cargo fleet and was infamous for his brutal negotiation style. But the moment Talon met Solari, his demeanor shifted. "You're Vayari," he said softly, in perfect Vayari. Solari's eyes widened in surprise, and she answered quickly, her voice lilting and musical. The two of them spoke rapidly for a few minutes while Elias stood there blinking. Finally, Talon turned back to him and said, "She says you treat her as an equal. That you listen. That you gave her a name, not a number." "I did," Elias said. "Because that's what she is." Talon nodded. "That matters to me." The contract Talon offered was better than anything Elias had hoped for, better routes, higher pay, even fuel subsidies. As they walked back toward the ship, Elias glanced sideways at her. "What did you really say to him?" "I told him you saved me," she said quietly. "That you see me as a person. And that I am proud to wear your name on my jacket. You make it sound like I'm some noble hero." "You are," she said. "You just don't know it." As they boarded the Starling Drift, Solari placed her hand on the bulkhead. "We are ready, Ember," she whispered. The ship's AI responded with a soft chime. "New mission logged. Navigation standing by." Back in the command cabin, Elias opened the next star route. 3 months of deep space hauling, dull to most, grueling to some. But with Solari on board, it didn't feel daunting. "Tomorrow," he said, "we head out again." "Good," Solari said. "More stars to see. More questions to ask." Elias smiled. 3 months in a sealed ship used to sound like a prison. She looked at him. "And now?" "Now it sounds like the best kind of freedom." The next morning, they made the jump. 2 weeks into the trip, they approached a rough system called Argo's Edge, unclaimed territory, lawless and unpredictable. Their delivery contact was a man named Calrendo, known for working both sides of the legal line. But the pay was high and the deadline tight. As they landed on the surface of the dusty station, Elias warned Solari, "Stay close. This place isn't like Kepler. These people see companions as assets." "That's it." She nodded, more serious than usual. "I will stay near. But I will not stay silent." Cal Rendo greeted them in a warehouse that looked like it had survived a dozen explosions. His smile was gold-toothed and empty. "So this is the Vayari," he said, circling Solari like she was a puzzle. "Heard rumors. Thought you were extinct." "This is Solari," Elias said. "My chief engineer." Cal laughed. "Chief engineer? She doesn't even carry a sidearm." "She carries everything else," Elias replied flatly. Cal's grin widened. "How much did she cost you?" "Double it, I'll take her off your hands." Elias's jaw clenched. "She's not for sale." "Everyone's for sale, Captain." "Not this time." Solari's markings dimmed, but she held Elias's gaze. Later, as they prepped for departure, they spotted Cal's men gathering near the ship. Armed. Waiting. "They're not going to let us leave, are they?" Elias asked. "No," Solari said. "But I have an idea." She vanished into the ship's maintenance tunnel, hands flying across control panels. Outside, the loading cranes began to stir. "I told you," she said over comms. "The ship listens." The cranes moved like arms of vengeance, scattering Cal's men in a storm of steel and sparks. Within minutes, the dock was cleared. Elias stood beside her at the control station, breathless. "How did you?" "I asked Ember to help," she said. "And Ember said yes." That night, as the stars stretched once again beyond the viewport, Elias looked at her and said, "You saved us." She looked back, quiet but firm. "I saved me, too." 1 year had passed since Elias first stepped into that dim corner stall on New Horizon Station. A lot had changed since then. The Starling Drift had changed, for one. No longer just a patched-together freighter, it bore bright markings now. Along its hull were painted delicate curves in Vayari script, nestled beside bold human initials, symbols of two cultures woven together. And its crew. Not just Elias and an aging AI anymore. Now, there was Solari, engineer, linguist, partner. No longer a companion in any sense of ownership. Months ago, Elias had filed the official documents himself, terminating her contract permanently. Solari now held equal shares in their trade company. Her name was on the manifests, the payment ledgers, and, most importantly, the crew registry. She hadn't left. Because she didn't have to. Their return to New Horizon Station felt strange, like walking into a version of your past that no longer fit. Elias kept expecting to feel that old loneliness creep back in, but it didn't. Not with Solari beside him. As they passed under the signage of Companion Row, she slowed. "I want to go back." Elias stopped in his tracks. "Back? There might be others," she said softly. "Others like me. Still waiting." The thought made his stomach tighten. That place still made his skin crawl. The flickering lights, the stale air, the too quiet stalls. But Solari walked forward, head held high. She wasn't the same creature that sat behind the shimmer field all those months ago. She wore a captain's jacket now, its collar sharp and straight. Her hair was braided back, her skin markings pulsing softly, not with fear, but purpose. They reached the far corner, the one Elias remembered all too well. The same vendor was there. The same cracked-toothed smile, the same crooked stall. Only the faces behind the shimmer field were different now. A trio of companions, one tall and insectoid, one with silver fur, one whose skin shifted colors with every breath. All looked as broken and quiet as Solari once had. The vendor squinted at Elias. "You again," he said. Looking to buy. Got better stock now. Stronger. Obedient. He didn't recognize Solari. Not yet. What happened to the one you sold me last year? Elias asked. The vendor snorted. That defective little thing. Probably dead. Told you she wouldn't last. Solari stepped forward. The vendor's face twisted into a confused scowl. Then disbelief. Then, slowly, fear. I'm not dead, she said. I'm Captain Solari of the Starling Drift. The vendor stared, mouth ajar. I was never defective, she continued. I was unrecognized. That's not the same. She turned to the three companions in the stalls and addressed each one, in their own languages. Their eyes widened, not just at the sound of their words, but at the fact someone saw them at all. I want to buy their contracts, she said. They're not for sale to you, the vendor snapped. Elias stepped beside her. They are. Because I'm buying them. And once I do, what I do with my property is none of your concern. The vendor fumed, but the law was on Elias's side. 10 minutes and a dozen credits later, the contracts were theirs. And the companions were free. Their names were Kita, Myra, and Zen. They were from different sectors. Different stories. But the same origin, sold, silenced, forgotten. At first, they didn't believe the freedom was real. They expected orders. Silence. Restrictions. Instead, Solari brought them aboard the Starling Drift and showed them the mess hall, the bunks, the engine room. This is your ship now, she said. If you choose to stay. You mean, we can leave? Zen asked, his skin flickering orange with disbelief. Anytime, Solari said. But if you stay, you'll learn. You'll work. You'll build something of your own. They stayed. The next weeks were chaos, in the best possible way. Myra proved brilliant with engines, even better than Solari in some systems. Kita had a natural sense of direction, learning navigation faster than Elias ever had. Zen soaked up languages like a sponge and quickly became their best trader. Mistakes happened, of course. Someone vented a storage bay. Someone else fried the coffee unit beyond repair. But the laughter returned. The silence was gone. One evening, Elias stood in the galley, watching Solari teach Zen how to recalibrate the communication relay. You're good at this, he said. Solari smiled without turning. I had a good teacher. No, he said softly. You didn't. You became one anyway. Later, they sat by the window. The stars outside blinked, countless and uncaring. But in the quiet between them, something stirred. I've been thinking, Solari said. That always means something big, Elias replied. We helped 3, she said. There are thousands more. Maybe millions. He nodded slowly. You're saying we stop running cargo. I'm saying maybe we start running hope. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, it'll be dangerous. There are people who won't want us doing this. Solari's markings brightened. Let them try to stop us. They'll find we're not easy cargo. He smiled. We never were. The Starling Drift had always moved through the stars like a humble freighter, quiet, ignored, useful. But now, with Solari at the helm beside Elias and 3 new crewmates learning the ropes, it was something else entirely. Not just a ship. Not just a home. A vessel with purpose. A thread pulling hope from the fabric of the galaxy and weaving it back into those who had been unraveling for too long. Their mission had evolved, no longer simple cargo hauls or supply runs. Now, they followed whispers. Distress signals. Rumors of broken contracts, forgotten laborers, or ships lost in the black with crews that had never been free. In deep space, near the edge of the Vayari expanse, they picked up a garbled signal. Fragmented. Weak. A transport vessel claiming engine failure and life support degradation. Nothing unusual, except for the voice at the end. Small. Frightened. Not a captain. Not a pilot. A companion, begging quietly for someone to come. Elias and Solari didn't hesitate. They rerouted immediately. Ember, prep emergency dock, Solari said. We may need medical override. Acknowledged, Captain, came the soft response. Atmospheric thresholds read stable but falling. They found the vessel adrift. No response from its bridge. It took 15 tense minutes to manually dock and override the hatch. Inside, darkness and flickering systems greeted them like ghosts. They found the crew first, locked in cryopods. Not in stasis. Abandoned. Left for dead. In the passenger deck, they found her. Young. Silver-skinned. Markings dulled with exhaustion. Curled in the corner of the room, whispering apologies to the empty air. Solari knelt and spoke softly in her native tongue. I'm not your owner, she said. I'm your sister. Come with me. They carried her back aboard the Starling Drift. Zen warmed her hands with heat packs. Myra calibrated life support for her physiology. Kita brewed strong tea. They didn't ask who she was or what she'd done. They asked if she was tired. If she was hungry. Later, when she could finally speak, she asked one question. Am I allowed to stay? Solari smiled. You're allowed to live. The days that followed were a quiet reminder of how delicate this new family really was. The rescued companion, who eventually told them her name was Eilina, didn't speak much, but she listened. She watched. And soon, she smiled. She watched Solari with reverence. Followed her like a shadow. Not in fear. But in hope. You're not like the others, Eilina said one night. Solari chuckled gently. I was. Then someone asked if I was kind. Eilina nodded slowly. No one ever asked me that. You'll ask someone else one day, Solari said. And it will change everything. Weeks passed. The crew grew stronger, steadier. Kita mastered the NAV systems and had a better instinct for gravitational drift than even the AI. Myra turned the galley into something resembling a real kitchen. Zen negotiated with merchants in 9 languages, often before Elias had even opened his mouth. Eilina joined the engineering team. She sang softly to the tools while she worked. One quiet night, Elias and Solari sat in the observation deck, an old cargo hold repurposed into a sanctuary of stars. She's starting to glow again, Elias said. Solari nodded. Like we did. We can't save everyone. No, she agreed. But we can save some. And maybe some is enough. They paused as Ember's voice came through the intercom. Long-range sensors detect encoded transmission. Possible distress beacon. Elias smiled, already rising. Plot the course. Confirmed. Adjusting trajectory. As the stars shifted beyond the window, Solari turned toward Elias. You know what we've become, right? He raised an eyebrow. Hope haulers, she said. He laughed softly. I like that. So do I. And so the Starling Drift flew on. No longer a vessel of loneliness, but a lighthouse. A quiet rebellion against a galaxy that too often chose profit over people. Every planet they touched, every voice they heard, they planted something small and bright, the idea that freedom wasn't a gift, it was a right. And kindness? Kindness was the catalyst. At the next port, they found another like Eilina. And another after that. Word spread. Not fast. Not loud. But steadily. Like the hum of a ship that had learned to sing again. In time, others joined their cause. Other traders. Other former companions. An old mining vessel called the Dustwake repurposed its cargo bay to hold refugees. A courier ship named Lucent Runner started leaving food caches on derelict stations. The work was slow. Dangerous. Not always clean. But it mattered. One cycle later, at a diplomatic summit orbiting Freya's belt, Solari was invited to speak. She stood in front of a crowd of captains, governors, and policymakers. Not because she'd been born powerful. But because she had survived, risen, and reached back to lift others. She told them about the tunnels. About the silence. About the moment someone asked if she was kind. And then she said, "There are more of us out there. Waiting. Don't ask what they can do for you. Ask who they are. Ask what they dream. And if you're lucky, they'll answer." Back aboard the Starling Drift, the crew gathered around the table, laughing over bad food and good stories. Elias raised his mug. "To family. To freedom," Solari said. "To whatever comes next," Zen added. And the ship, old, patched, humming with a dozen languages and one shared purpose, jumped into hyperspace. And so the Starling Drift became more than just a freighter, it became a beacon. A whisper in the void. A promise that even in the darkest corners of the universe, someone might still ask, "Are you kind?" And someone else might say, "Yes. I try to be." Solari, once dismissed as broken, had become a captain in spirit long before she ever wore the title. Elias, once hollowed by loneliness, had found not just companionship, but purpose. And those they saved? They didn't stay broken. They learned. They grew. They taught others. Because kindness, they discovered, is contagious. In a galaxy of trade routes and politics, of conflict and cold logic, the crew of the Starling Drift carved out a quieter revolution, one built not on firepower, but on empathy. On listening to machines that sighed. On speaking names instead of numbers. On noticing those who had been ignored for too long. They couldn't rescue everyone. But they rescued some. And those few became many. And so the ship continues, drifting through the stars with purpose and patience, its hull painted with symbols of cultures that now walk together. Its crew, once forgotten, now chosen. Its mission, simple and extraordinary. Find the lost. Offer them a place. And show them they were never broken, just waiting to be believed in.